parent, you can help your children's credit worthiness even before they are adults. One of the reasons young adults struggle when they are first on their own is that they have a thin credit file, meaning it's not that they have bad credit, it's that they have no credit. So lenders don't have any way of assessing their credit worthiness. But parents, if you add your child as an authorized user when they are in their teens, they will start to build a credit history. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I consider to be a unique life experience. And you can read more about that in the notes, the bio, or the profile. My intent is to share stories and hopefully provide some life and career lessons that will help you in your journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5 and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some initial commentary thoughts on current news. Then I'll have a deeper discussion on one topic, which will be today's truth. And then I like to finish with an American history fun fact. So let me start with a follow-up from last week's episode. In that episode, I said body positivity was a joke because no one would choose to be overweight or obese. I acknowledged that many people have come to accept their size, but that doesn't mean they prefer it. And despite the negative and sometimes nasty comments I received, I stand by what I said. I didn't fat shame or judge. All I said was, and I truly believe, just about every person who is overweight and obese, if given the choice, would choose to be thinner. Okay. We've wrapped the year 2025 and we're now at the beginning of a new year. So first, I want to sincerely thank anyone who has listened to any episode of The Ruthless Truth this year. I launched in May and I really appreciate all the support and feedback, even the critical comments, because it helps me get better. And I look forward to continuing to engage with you next year. Okay, so before turning to 2026 and the optimism of starting a new year, I thought I'd reflect on 2025. How was your year? What were the welcome surprises and unexpected disappointments for you? Well, there were so many, but I'll just touch upon a few. First, the president's return to office after sitting on the sidelines, stewing over his loss to Joe Biden in 2020. How was his year? Well, if you ask him, he will tell you it's the best year any president has ever had. No, really, that's what he said. But I'm asking you and the rest of America, how was his first year? Well, I tell you what, let me start first with some positive outcomes. Okay, first, immigration and border security. This was a key focus of the president's campaign and one of his most consistently repeated campaign promises. And you know what? He was successful. The administration achieved a record low in illegal border crossings and a record high in deportations. As a result, for the first time in 50 years, the U.S. immigrant population actually shrank. However, this raised concerns about the long-term impact on the workforce, especially in agriculture and construction. Second positive outcome, the stock market. All the major indices had double-digit gains led by the NASDAQ, which increased approximately 22%, closely followed by the S&P, which gained another 19% for the year. Those are impressive numbers. And for the 50% of households who own stocks or equities, they saw significant increases in their portfolios and net worth. What drove these gains? Well, the leading ones were, first, the tariffs weren't as detrimental as expected. The Fed did cut rates 3 times. and the euphoria around AI technology. But again, that's only part of the story. Unless investors actually sold and cashed out some stocks, these financial gains were only on paper. It didn't put a single incremental dollar in consumers' pockets, meaning they did not escape the effects of inflation and the affordability issues facing all U.S. households. So, we must continue to remind our leaders in Washington that the stock market is not the economy. And despite the strong performance of the stock market, this was not a good economic year. Okay, so those were two good outcomes. Now, a few disappointments. The Russian-Ukraine war did not end on the first day of the new administration as promised, and now appears headed toward its 4-year anniversary in early 2026. On inflation, we're ending the year at 3%, which is just about where we were in January. I railed on the U.S. Congress in the previous episode of The Ruthless Truth, so I won't take additional shots today, but they were basically useless and did little to nothing to help the average U.S. consumer. Other thoughts about the year? Overall, I would say it was mentally and emotionally exhausting. I don't know about you, but I felt like I heard a lot of news every day, but I didn't hear much good news. It felt like there was a malaise in the country. And many other Americans feel the same way. The president's approval rating is in the 36% range, receiving his lowest marks for the economy, the tariffs, and for being seen as honest and trustworthy. Also, worry about the economy, healthcare, and Social Security increased significantly. Additionally, there are growing concerns about the political division and corruption in the government. Personally, I don't believe this can continue long term. The hate, the incivility, the violent rhetoric, all of this takes a toll. And at some point, the country will self-correct. I don't know what it will look like, but our collective psyche cannot sustain another year like this one. My hope and prayer is that all of us have a better year in 2026. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth. Today, I want to talk about your financial health. And specifically, I want to cover two topics which are related: debt and credit scores, but primarily credit scores. So today's truth is about credit scores and what you can do to improve it. First observation: given how crucial credit scores are to our everyday lives, I find it astounding how many Americans have a very limited understanding of how they work and how scores are calculated. Credit scores are critical because they impact your ability to obtain loans for a house or a car, and they determine the interest rate you will pay on those loans, credit cards, and other debt. Credit score is a key factor in determining approval for a lease on an apartment. Insurance companies utilize credit scores in the underwriting process to determine whether you will be approved for an insurance policy and how much you will have to pay for that policy. Finally, some employers review credit scores in determining whether or not to extend a job offer. So, why does your credit score have such a broad impact on your life? Because it's seen as an indication of whether you are a responsible adult. The thinking, whether fair or not, is that if you're irresponsible in one aspect of your life, then you are likely to be irresponsible in most, if not all, other factors in your life. Okay, let's start with the basics. What is a credit score? Well, a credit score is a numerical representation of a person's credit worthiness based on their credit history. Most credit scores have a range from 300 to 850, with higher scores indicating better credit health. Now, you may also have heard the term FICO score, and people often use them interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. The primary difference is that FICO is the score that lenders trust most because it is consistently and reliably calculated the same way. Other credit scores can vary in their calculations, evidenced by the differences in scores from the three leading credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Although lenders do view these scores as credible. So now that we know what it is, how is it calculated? Well, there are 5 key components in the credit score calculation, but they are not weighted equally. Here they are in order. Number 1, payment history. It represents 35% of your score. This is simply looking at whether you pay your bills on time. And on time is within 30 days of the due date. It is the single greatest determinant of your score. Okay? Number 2, credit utilization. While most people realize they need to pay their bills on time, they may not be aware of the importance of credit utilization. This factor represents 30% of your score, and it's calculated by looking at how much credit is available to you, then look at how much of that credit you are actually using. For example, if you have 2 credit cards that have a combined credit limit of $20,000 and your current balance on these cards is $15,000, your credit utilization is 75%. Most lenders want to see a credit utilization under 30%, with the ideal being under 10%. Why does this matter? Because a high utilization indicates you're living beyond your means and you're using credit to subsidize your spending that can't be covered by your income. It makes you look riskier. Okay? So, the first 2 factors comprise 65% of your score. Now, the third factor is credit history, which simply looks at how long you've had credit. The longer, the better. Factor 4 is credit mix. This represents 10% of your score, so not a big factor. But the point is, not all credit is created equal. Secured credit refers to credit that is for something tangible, such as a car or a home. Because if the borrower defaults, the lender can seek recovery by repossessing the car or the house. Unsecured credit mostly refers to credit card debt. And then the final factor, which also represents 10%, is new credit or credit inquiries. Applying for a lot of new credit in a short period of time will hurt your score. It suggests desperation or a need to get more credit to sustain potentially irresponsible spending. Please note, income is not a factor in determining your credit score. Let me say that again. Income is not a factor in determining your credit score. I know this from personal experience. When my family and I moved to Philadelphia, we applied for a new mortgage. I had just joined Comcast and my salary was ridiculously high. So we didn't include my wife on the application because she didn't have income, but she did have debt. So we figured including her would just hurt our approval chances. But the mortgage banker called and strongly suggested that we include her on the application. He simply said to me, "You have a good credit score, but she has a really, really good score, and including her will greatly improve your approval odds." Okay, got it. So again, income is not a factor in your credit score. Okay, so now you know what a credit score is and how it's calculated. So what's a good score? Well, as I said, credit scores range from 300 to 850. So let me break it down. A score of 800 to 850 is considered excellent, okay? 740 to 799 is considered very good. If you have a score of at least 740, you will very likely be approved on most credit applications that you submit, okay? 670 to 739 is good. Any score below 670 is considered subprime, and these consumers will pay significantly higher interest rates as they are viewed as risky. A score of 580 to 669 is considered fair, and 580 and below is poor. All right. We now know that achieving a high credit score should be a goal for all of us. So what can you do to improve your credit score? Well, here are the 2 key opportunities or actions for improving your credit score. First and foremost, pay your bills on time. Whatever you need to do, pay your bills on time. Just one missed payment can lower your score by more than 50 points. And then second, limit your credit usage. Keep your credit balances low. If you have available credit but are not using it, you look more favorable to lenders. But let me say this, do not close credit card accounts. I'm impressed by people who work diligently to pay down their credit card balances. This is great as it frees up income you otherwise would be using to pay your credit card bills. But if you do pay it all the way down, do not close the account, okay? Because this will reduce your total available credit and thus increase your credit utilization, which, as you will recall, is 30% of your score. Back to our earlier example, if you have two cards that each have 10,000 credit limit and you have a total of 3,000 in debt, your credit utilization is 15%, which is excellent. But if you pay off a card and close it, but still have the 3,000, your utilization is now 30%, even though you have the same amount of debt. And lastly, monitor your score. There are many free options for obtaining and monitoring your credit score. Many credit card providers include it as a free service on your account. But you want to monitor your progress so you can stay on track. And then also, credit card fraud is rampant. You want to be able to quickly identify any unauthorized purchases and report them to your card provider. One additional comment. Parents, you can help your children's creditworthiness even before they are adults. One of the reasons young adults struggle when they are first on their own is that they have a thin credit file, meaning it's not that they have bad credit, it's that they have no credit. So lenders don't have any way of assessing their credit worthiness. But parents, if you add your child as an authorized user when they are in their teens, they will start to build a credit history. We added our sons when my oldest when they were 15. And when my oldest son was a junior in college, he moved into an apartment and was looking to get cable service. And they told him he would need to have a cosigner until they ran his credit. And he had a 700 credit score, simply for years of being on our credit cards, okay? So when it comes to credit scores and improving them, let me summarize. Achieving and maintaining high credit score is critical because it impacts so many aspects of your life. And the key to achieving a high score is to pay bills on time and keep balances low. You need to also regularly check and monitor your score to keep yourself on track and to quickly identify any potential errors or fraud on your account. Okay, let's get to today's American History Fun Fact. Today's American History Fun Fact. I want to tell the story of the TV show I Love Lucy, one of the most innovative and popular television programs of all time. It was a sitcom that focused on the life of a married couple, Lucy and Ricky Ricardo, played by real-life husband and wife Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. Okay, so quick bios on Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. Lucille Desiree Ball was born on August 6, 1911 in Jamestown, New York. In February 1915, when she was 3 years old, while living in Michigan, Lucy's father died of typhoid fever. Lucy's mother, who was pregnant at the time, moved the family back to New York to be closer to her family. And then 4 years later, Lucy's mother, Dee Dee, remarried. Now, Lucy's stepfather encouraged her to pursue drama, and when Lucy was 12 years old, she auditioned for a chorus line role with the Shriners. Lucy enjoyed the praise she received from being on stage. Lucy's professional acting career began in her late teens. In the 1930s and 40s, she had small to moderate roles in motion pictures, but never achieved the success she had hoped for. Now, Desiderio Arnaz was born in March of 1917 in Santiago de Cuba, a descendant of Cuban nobility. But the Cuban Revolution of 1933 forced Arnaz and his family to lose everything and flee Cuba. The family then fled to Miami, where Desi attended high school. After high school, Arnaz made a name for himself as a musician and as a band leader. And he pursued this career for decades, later became a naturalized U.S. citizen. And then he served in the U.S. military for 2 years during World War II. Okay. Now, we know the show, I Love Lucy, starring Lucille Ball and Desi, to be a classic, filled with gags, still referenced today. But that show was more than just a gag factory. I Love Lucy pushed boundaries in both content and form that left an indelible imprint on the television form itself, which we all take for granted today. I mean, just getting CBS to agree to air the show was an impressive achievement. But after taking the risk, the network was quickly rewarded, because within 6 months of the show's premiere, more than 11 million households were tuning in each week. And that's back when there were only 15 million households who owned TV sets. The sitcom is often credited with creating the multi-camera setup for filming live television. Now, this is not entirely true. The system of shooting was actually created by Al Salmon and Carl Freund, who first used 3 cameras to shoot the game show Truth or Consequences for a live audience. But I Love Lucy can still claim to be the first sitcom to use the multi-camera technique. And while the camera setup was pioneering, it's not the most impactful or even controversial element of the show. I Love Lucy premiered in 1951 and featured a white woman married to a Cuban husband. Again, this was 1951, where nearly half of the 50 states had laws that banned interracial marriage. Even California, where the sitcom was filmed, had just repealed its laws against interracial marriage 3 years earlier. Still, even though I Love Lucy was the #1 show in the country with millions of weekly viewers, there were still people who had issue with the depiction of the marriage. Now, it may have helped that Desi Arnaz was light-skinned and the show was filmed in black and white, but it was still clear that he was Hispanic. Additionally controversial on the show, the characters, Lucy and Ricky, had a child, which meant they were having sex, and that Lucy was pregnant, although that word was banned on network television, so she was referred to as expecting or with child. The most watched episode of I Love Lucy was Lucy Goes to the Hospital, in which she gives birth. It comes in the middle of season 2. You want to know how many people watched that episode? 44 million. Over 70% of the people in the United States who owned televisions tuned into that episode. The show ran for 6 seasons, which is a testament to Lucy's commitment and resilience. Because remember, this was a real-life married couple playing a fictional married couple on a TV show. And it was widely known that Desi Arnaz had a history of engaging in extramarital affairs. This is one of the reasons Lucy insisted that Desi be cast as her husband so she could keep him close to her. Additionally, they're co-stars, Vivian Vance and William Frawley, who played Ethel and Fred Mertz, their close neighbors and friends. The actors actually despised each other. Vivian didn't appreciate the nearly 20-year age difference, and Frawley had a history of heavy drinking and being a problem on the set. Still, they were able to work through it and help contribute to the success of the show. One final factor on the legacy of I Love Lucy. Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball's business decisions, especially choosing to film on 35mm film and retaining the rights, fundamentally created the model for TV reruns and national syndication, revolutionizing television economics by allowing shows to be sold repeatedly long after their initial broadcast, making shows like I Love Lucy evergreen assets. So, to summarize the legacy of I Love Lucy, it's a foundational sitcom that redefined TV with its live studio audience, 3 cameras, and groundbreaking production, achieving #1 ratings for years, winning tons of Emmys, and its episodes still run globally, establishing the blueprint for modern TV comedy. Okay, that's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. I want to wish everyone a happy new year and hope 2026 is great. Again, follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Ruthless Truth. And there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. Thanks again, and I will talk to you soon.